Alright, welcome to the Draft Utopia NFL Digest for Week 10. I just finished up my American Government exam earlier today, and I know it's 5:24 p.m., but it's never too late to upload a video as we're currently filming this around 5:25. But I had kind of a incident this morning, like a sleeping problem. Like I had a really bad headache last night, so I got a lot of rest today after my government test. So I'm feeling a little chipper right now, but I should be better now because I got some rest. But I was feeling a little chipper earlier around like 5 a.m. Like I felt really bad, like I got a really bad headache. And I went to my class to take my tests. But yeah, that doesn't really matter now because there were some games. The Redskins took on the Vikings. Minnesota won 34-27. Ponder 17 for 21 before he left the game. Robert Griffin III, 24 for 37, 281 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Vikings win with defense late in the game. Minnesota's defensive ends got to Griffin. You also have to account for the Vikings secondary in Thursday night's win over the Redskins. Minnesota's corners finally looked decent for the first time all season, playing good press coverage, limiting what Robert Griffin's receivers could do in the red zone late in the game. I really like the way Minnesota's secondary stepped up and helped the Vikings win this game. Seahawks-Falcons. Seattle got a field goal in the first quarter. Second quarter, Seahawks with another field goal. Matt Bryant with a field goal. Russell Wilson threw both of his passing touchdowns in the second quarter. Seattle had 23-3 at halftime. Seahawks won 33-10. And Russell Wilson continues to get things done without his star receivers, Sidney Rice and Percy Harvin. Golden Tate continues to emerge. He continues to show people that he can be a number one guy, despite the fact that Seattle's got a lot of injuries right now. Wide receiver, they don't really have a tight end. Russell Okung's injured at left tackle. And I like what Golden Tate and Russell Wilson are doing because Golden Tate's gone from this guy that, okay, he was a number one receiver coming out of Notre Dame in 2010. And he was so bad, he looked like a bench player. But then he kept working on his progressions. Then he became like a slot receiver at the beginning of this season after being a subpar number 2 receiver, and he did excellent in the slot. But it's like, guy had so much experience in the slot, so much experience on the bench, so much experience trying to help Russell Wilson win because he loves Russell Wilson's work ethic. It's like Golden Tate's trying to make sure he becomes Russell Wilson's favorite receiving target so he can get some more money in Seattle. And he's doing a hell of a job this year. So, I mean, he had the game-winning catch against the Green Bay Packers in a replacement officials game. He's had some 100-yard games this season, even with Sidney Rice and Percy Harvin out. So, you have to look at Golden Tate's season and be enamored to some extent. The Bengals faced the Ravens. And this game went back and forth in the fourth quarter until the Ravens won in overtime on a field goal. Ravens led 17-0 until the Bengals tied the game before sending the contest into overtime. The 4-5 Ravens close in on the 6-4 Bengals. Lions, Bears. Jay Cutler threw a passing touchdown to Braden Marshall. Helps the Bears 7-0. Game tied at 7. DeAndre Levy with the pick to prevent the Bears' touchdown. Matthew Stafford to Calvin Johnson. Lions led 21-13. Jay Cutler left the game injured. 6-3 Lions now control the NFC North. Philadelphia Eagles versus the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay was toast without Aaron Rodgers. Nick Foles, 3 touchdowns and no picks. Eagles win again, and Foles is emerging as a playoff quarterback. LaShawn McCoy also had over 100 rushing yards. Philadelphia's win over the Packers. Is Green Bay's secondary mediocre? To some extent, it is, considering the fact that Tramon Williams of Rutgers, a guy who was once Charles Woodson's number 2 corner in Super Bowl 45, is really the only legit corner on this secondary. And I don't even think you can call him a number 1 field cornerback because he was at the top of his game when he was a number 2 corner, and then he just got toasted in the playoff loss to the Giants. He had to adapt to being a number 1 corner after Woodson declined, and he dealt with some injuries. So it's really been one of those what-if situations where losing to the Giants in the playoffs actually did more harm for Tramon Williams' confidence than good. And it just feels like Foles doesn't really have a quality secondary he's thrown against yet, since he's thrown against the Raiders and the Packers. But it's like he's made the right throws. He's dropped back in the pocket. He's executed the proper footwork, made the proper progressions, and he's using the deep ball accuracy and the long passing game to exploit Green Bay's safeties by stretching the field, making sure he gets the ball to his tight ends, his slot receivers, and really getting people involved, getting Deshaun Jackson involved on the outside or the inside. You see a lot of leadership by Nick Foles through the passing game for the Philadelphia Eagles, and you really have to be impressed with Foles if you're an Eagles fan. Foles is the future in Philadelphia, regardless of what Chip Kelly may have to say about Michael Vick. Foles is the guy if he keeps this up. Jaguars versus Titans, first quarter. Maurice Jones-Drew, 6-yard run. Jaguars led 7-0. Josh Scobie, 32-yard field goal. Jaguars led 10-0. Jaguars led 13-0. Jake Locker was injured early. It really made a difference because the Jaguars were able to get off to a lead because of Jake Locker's injury and because of his turnovers early in the game. And they were able to build off that momentum. This might be Jacksonville's only win of the entire year, but it's a statement win on the road nonetheless, and I think the Jaguars are going to win a home game against the Texans later in the season. So that would give them 2 wins, and I think the Jaguars are going to finish 2-14 now. Bills-Steelers, Dan Carpenter hit a 20-yard field goal. Bills led 3-0. Second quarter, Steelers tie the game. Jerry O'Cotchery with a 5-yard pass from Ben Roethlisberger. Steelers led 10-3 at halftime before Le'Veon Bell scored a 4-yard touchdown run. Fourth quarter, Steelers hit 2 more field goals and won 23-10. Pittsburgh goes to 3-5 after a difficult 3-6 after a difficult Week 9 win against the Raiders. Yeah, it's 3-6. I know a lot of the teams have played at least 9 games in the regular season. There's some teams that have played 10 games. I'm pretty sure this is the last week for bye weeks, and then they're going to go back to the regular Week 11 games for scheduling. So Cowboys and the Rams are on bye weeks in Week 11, and then I'm pretty sure after that, this will be the last week for bye weeks. Week 12 might be another bye week, but okay, so there's 2 more bye weeks, and then Week 13 through 17, you'll have 5 weeks with no bye weeks. So weeks 11 and 12, there will be bye weeks. Those are the final 2 weeks for bye weeks. And, yep, November 21st, Saints will face the Falcons at 8:25 on NFL Network. And that's the week before Thanksgiving games in the NFL. So it's a really interesting schedule looking ahead into November. And 3-6 Steelers, they win again. The Giants getting on a bit of a run. They win again. They're now 3-6. And Eli Manning's really done a good job rallying this team, making sure the Giants make better choices after a sluggish start to the season. And the NFC East, Tony Romo is too inconsistent. Robert Griffin III got off to a rocky start. Even though he did well against the Vikings, his team didn't win. And inconsistency in generating victories keeps Robert Griffin III from making a move, even if he's beginning to play well this late in the season and having that similar season to Cam Newton's 2012 season last year, before Newton got hot late in the year. And you look at Tony Romo, he's just too inconsistent. He throws into coverage. He makes a pick in the fourth quarter. He just does something that costs the Cowboys the game. So you filter out those 2 quarterbacks. Right now you look at Foles and the Eagles, who probably are the front runner to win the NFC East. And then you look at the Giants. Eli Manning, he's hot right now. He's winning games. He's doing all the right things for the Giants. And this is the thing. If the Giants manage to come back and win the division, Eli's going to get the second half MVP award for the second half of the season. Rams-Colts. Rams won 38-8. Tavon Austin, 2 receiving touchdowns on 2 receptions for 138 receiving yards. He also ran a 98-yard punt return for a touchdown. Panthers, 49ers, Carolina won 10-9 because they did a much better job running the football by run blocking in this contest with guys like Jordan Gross, guys like Ryan Khalil, guys that really know how to make a difference, run blocking in the trenches in Carolina's run blocking scheme. Plus, they have the backs. They have the depth in the backfield with D'Angelo Williams, with guys like Mike Tolbert and stuff. So you got to love the depth by the Panthers. And it wasn't Patrick Willis or Navarro Bowman that had that double-digit game as tacklers. Yes, Bowman and Willis did do a good job executing tackles, but they let Carolina run the ball way too frequently. So they've got to be more disciplined mentally heading into next week's contest, because when you're Patrick Willis or Navarro Bowman and you're getting paid big bucks to play for Jim Harbaugh's 49ers, you've got to keep teams from rushing for over 100 rushing yards on the ground like Carolina if you expect to win. Luke Kuechly, though, Kuechly did a superb job. Excellent eye contact. He was using his body language, his footwork to recognize where the quarterback was at all times. And he knew where Colin Kaepernick was. He was on Kaepernick the way SEAL Team 6 was on Bin Laden. But that's not important. What's important is that Kuechly did his job. 11 solo tackles and a sack. Kuechly took action into his own hands. Colin Kaepernick only threw for 91 passing yards, didn't throw for a passing touchdown, and Luke Kuechly just owned it for Carolina defensively. And his coordination at middle linebacker was paramount because San Francisco couldn't rush for 100 rushing yards. And doing all those little things makes a huge difference when you have a guy like Kuechly that's going to step in and make stuff happen, especially when you don't really have any big-name players on your pass defense. Secondary deserves props as well, but it all started with Kuechly's impact at middle linebacker in this contest. His ability to stop the run, recognize what Kaepernick's doing in coverage, and just having a career day at middle linebacker really was paramount in Carolina's victory on Sunday. The Houston Texans faced the Arizona Cardinals. Case Keenum, another spectacular game. Keenum continues to maintain solid rapport with wide receiver Andre Johnson. Johnson, number 80, made some acrobatic catches in the end zone when he torched Patrick Peterson in coverage. He torched Peterson when Peterson was playing the field cornerback role, and he torched Peterson when Peterson was playing the boundary role on the right side of the field. Well, left if you're seeing the TV, but like the quarterback's left. The field cornerback usually is on the quarterback's right side, and the boundary cornerback's usually on the quarterback's left side. And number one cornerbacks usually play on the quarterback's right side. But since Andre Johnson is the Texans' number one receiver, when Andre goes to the left, Peterson's going to follow him. He's going to make sure he's man-to-man on Andre Johnson. And while he did a good job limiting him to under 100 yards or limiting him to under 10 catches, the problem is Johnson made those critical touchdown catches in the red zone. And he really continues to deliver for Case Keenum, knowing that it's big. Like, the Texans have to play better ball, or there's going to be some major changes in. Andre Johnson doesn't want those changes, but he's putting the work in to make sure changes don't occur. And you don't really see that with Roethlisberger, but Roethlisberger's got a bad offensive line this year, and you really just can't make that statement towards Roethlisberger because he doesn't have the blocking, the protection, and the Texans do. Broncos, Chargers, Peyton Manning and Denver win 28-20. The bigger storyline from this game was the fact that Peyton Manning was injured. First, left tackle Ryan Clady goes IR, then Von Miller's suspension. Denver gets Von Miller back in exchange for John Fox recovering. Then Peyton Manning got injured in the contest. 25 for 36 with 330 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and no picks. Manning having a career season for the Denver Broncos. Dallas Cowboys versus New Orleans Saints. Cowboys lead 3-0. Cowboys were up 10-3. Saints regained the lead 14-10. And it was 28-10 New Orleans at halftime after Darren Sproles got a rushing and a passing touchdown. He ran the ball down the middle because run blockers Carl Nix and Jari Evans. I think Carl Nix is on the Buccaneers. Ben Grubbs is now on the Saints. But Ben Grubbs and Jari Evans, these are 2 Pro Bowl caliber guards when they're on their A game. And even though they haven't displayed the pass blocking at times, there have been nights where these guys have just owned it in run blocking. And since Dallas is one of the worst run-stuffing units at defensive tackle, it was just so effortless for two veterans like Grubbs and Evans to manipulate this run defense. And New Orleans, because they got that kind of play out of their guards, they were able to exploit Dallas, pick apart that entire defense, because they have Drew Brees, the best quarterback in the NFL. And Brees had the running game tonight because he was able to use his guards to exploit Dallas's weakness at defensive tackle. And Saints also have the best tight end in the NFL, Jimmy Graham, and they've got Colston. And when those guys get a lot of hype, they're going to get some coverages, they're going to get some double teams, and even when those guys get coverages, Brees still has additional ammunition that he can throw to. And I think that makes the New Orleans Saints the most dangerous team in the NFL, even though the Seahawks are clearly the favorite in the NFC right now. The Seahawks aren't going to have those receivers or the offensive linemen to win in the playoffs, even though they're winning games right now with a pretty relatively easy schedule. I think that's going to begin to work against the Seahawks at some point. And if it doesn't work against them in the regular season, Seattle's going to be one of those teams that gets home field and then they lose to a wild card team, because that's what's going to happen to the Seahawks. Like Nick Foles or the Giants or the team that wins the NFC East will get in, they'll win the wild card game, they'll go on the road to Seattle, they'll knock off the Seahawks, and then we'll see that team lose to the Saints in the NFC Championship. We'll probably see something like that happen. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's all rampant speculation at this point, but Saints won 49-17. Drew Brees, 34 for 41, 392 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And we're not doing a podcast for Draft Utopia this week because I've got a lot of stuff I need to take care of, and I thought that we were going to do one earlier this morning, but we got Clint Hurdle and Terry Francona won Manager of the Year in the MLB. You look at the NBA news, well, NBA just, I don't know. I'm not a huge NBA guy, but college basketball last night, you saw Kansas beat Duke because of Andrew Wiggins' clutch factor at the end, and Michigan State owned it against Kentucky. And even when Kentucky came back, Michigan State still stood their ground in such epic fashion. So there were some great college basketball games on last night. A lot of fun action in sports, baseball headlines, and Carolina Hurricanes beat the Colorado Avalanche, ended the road winning streak. So pretty interesting night in sports. So that'll do it for Draft Utopia this week. All right, cool. Later.